we go.
Okay, so hi, and welcome to another episode of the Kandy Fontaine Show. I'm Alexis Johnson, aka Kandy Fontaine, and I'll be your host for this podcast, which we're recording on Zoom, and then we're going to upload it this afternoon to YouTube. And my special guest today is none other than Rissa Miller, and I've got this write up for just excuse me just a second here, so I'll bring it up. Um, let's see if I can find it. Rissa Miller is a folklorist, writer, um, and speaker who works at the crossroads of storytelling, ethics, and the unseen world. Sounds amazing. From poetry to folklore to the culture history of ghosts and superstition, Riss explores how human belief shapes the world around us, what we fear, what we consume, and what we choose to honor. Um, Her work invites audiences to look more closely at the stories they carry and the ones they're still writing. Vegan for over 30 years and former senior editor of Vegan Journal, she brings a deeply rooted commitment to compassion into every facet of her work. And so I'm really delighted to have you on board here, Rissa.
Thank
We
you. It's lovely to be here.
yeah, squeezy hugs. Um, now I'm gonna give a few shout outs because I wouldn't know you if it weren't for our incredible mutual friend Nicole Six. And
Yes.
this is this
And don't
is
forget Trouble the cat, too.
and Trouble the cat. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
Trouble is part of our ecosystem.
absolutely.
Literally our ecosystem. So shout out to Nicole. This is this is okay. This is Nicole as drawn by Adrian Baldwin as my femme fatale character,
I have that too.
Kandy Fontaine, slutty detective. As originally appeared this exact same image originally appeared in the Candy Font on the cover of the Candy Fontaine Chronicles, uh, uh, being the adventures of a slutty detective, and the title, "Slutty Detective," was actually suggested by a novel by Kathy Acker called Empire of the Senseless. And I'd forgotten that I'd actually read that the exact quote is, I was a slutty detective in a city of mirrors. And when I had my pal Ken Goffman, aka Are You Serious, co-founder of Mondo 2000 magazine. I know improbable, but on my show, I've had him many times. And he said, "Well, you're aware that title comes from, you know, my friend Kathy Acker, because he actually dated Kathy Acker." And
Oh
it's
my gosh.
really wild, right? That he, so this whole thing, I need to be mindful of time, but I need to give a shout out to Ken Goffman because he's one of the people without whom we wouldn't have this, our current configuration of Nocturnicorn Books. So yeah, I'm the founder of Nocturnicorn Books, and it's more than an imprint. It's a community. It's a value system. It's friendship. It's lineage. It's legacy. And I guess I would say there. I'm just going to focus in on a couple of people because we really need to get into talking about the books, talking about and for you to read your poetry and to discuss Tater Bean and the mythic origin story of Tater Bean, how that came about. Very briefly, Nicole H6, um, our cover model for several of our books, and is always very gracious and kind, taking a selfie with her holding in a very sort of recursive mise en abîme fashion of her holding, a copy of a book that has her picture on the cover. And so it gets into like recursion, which is one of my favorite tropes, like, writers like Borges and, Italo Calvino and Nabokov, use a lot of recursion,
Hmm.
and mathematical concepts. And so I would say there are two people that are primarily responsible for my doing what I do now. Actually, three or four or five, but I try to keep it down to Ellen Mabey. Ellen Mabey. I met Ellen Mabey, the poet, actress, um, musician, spoken word performer, icon. Um, and if you don't know Ellen, if you don't know the woman, you need to know the woman. I mean, where do I even begin? She was the one who encouraged me to develop and publish a book called The Death Jazz. That was 2012. She also invited me to read at Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center in Venice Beach, California, which is known I mean, it's sort of like the Shakespearean Company of the West Coast. It's one of the most famous venues for literature in the world. People who've read there include Iris Berry, Patti Smith, Dennis Cooper, you know, and some of these people are actually friends of mine, and I'm really, really honored and fortunate. You've had it's very, very famous for being the place that Exene Cervenka and John Doe met, you know, and at the Wednesday evening poetry workshops that they have. Other people who've spoken there include um, oh, a gal named she was the junior poet. What was it the she was read at the President Biden's inauguration. Um, I'm
Oh,
talking about, right?
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah,
She was
so
phenomenal.
it was phenomenal. And
Yeah,
she's got her start at Beyond Baroque and Amanda Gorman.
that's
And
it.
she and Gaga and J-Lo rocked it. I mean, I don't know who was more iconic, right? I absolutely adore Gaga. I mean, right, she's fantastic. And J-Lo, and it was, I mean, they dwarfed Biden. I'm kind of disappointed with Biden, but that's for another day. And anyway, so Ellen encouraged me to develop this book, and then she blurbed it. I got blurbs from Dominique Lowell, aka the Janis Joplin of spoken word, and I got blurbs from John Shirley, who's another person who's very important to my career. John Shirley is, as I guess, best known for a couple of things. One, he co-created the cyberpunk genre. He's responsible for that. So if you've heard of something called The Matrix, that's he's behind that. I mean, going back, well, via the sisters Wachowski, who are transgender directors and director producer sisters who also made a movie called Bound with Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly was in a movie with Ellen Mabey. It's a long story called Dancing at the Blue Iguana, and also featured, Daryl Hannah and um, Sandra. Oh, so Ellen Mabey, Richard Mariano is the former executive director of Beyond Baroque. John Shirley, who, okay, I guess if you've heard of a band called Blue Oyster Cult,
Of course.
of
Who
course,
hasn't?
right? Who
Yeah.
hasn't, right? He's all over like their last five albums. He also wrote a little known film called The Crow. Okay. And he's been endorsed my work, more than once over more than a decade. And So John Shirley, Ellen Mabey, Dominic Lowell, Thomas S. Roche, so Bram Stoker Award nominee and a collaborator with me, an old friend. And so then, so very, very, I'm trying to compress this. So Ellen Mabey, over the years, we remained friends. And after she and Richard invited me to speak at Beyond Baroque, that was in 2012. It was the same year that I met a woman named Iris Berry. And Iris Berry, for those of you who just have been living under a rock, if you've ever heard of something called punk rock, right? Um, it was pretty much her, Joan Jett, another collaborator, a friend of mine, Carrie Lee Chrome, who co-founded a
Mhm.
little band called The Runaways. You may have heard of them. So it's like it's improbable. And so all these people have been behind this experiment called A Collective Paw, uh, Nocturnal Coin Books. Now, the reason we call it A Collective Paw is because of a poem by Ellen Mabey called Whiff of Wonder. Her fans include Viggo Mortensen, Henry Rollins, who's also a publisher, Exene Cervenka, Jackson Brown, and Grail Marcus, the culture critic. Has a PhD in sociology from UC Berkeley, wrote a book called Lipstick Traces. He writes for Rolling Stone, right? So her fans include legends. Pleasant Gaiman is another person who's part of our ecosystem. They were talking about punk rock. So I just want to thank everybody who's been behind, Nocturnicorn Books and given us support because it's a value system. It's a community. We don't have any advertising. We don't have any publicity. We don't have any distribution. We go through Amazon, which is problematic, but it is what it is. And so I was very excited to be working with you. I was introduced to you by Nicole Six, and who's also a screenwriter, actress, model. What doesn't she do? Right.
It's true. She's fantastic. Yeah,
She is
I
just
met
like
her through podcasting. So yeah.
that's yeah. And she actually reached out to me. Um, uh, it's hard to believe it's been more than a year. Because oh yeah, yeah. So I would have to mention because I work with a guy named David J. Haskins. And if you ever heard of a band called Bauhaus, and a little song called, I don't know, Bela Lugosi's Dead. Yeah, he's the guy who's responsible for that. So he's basically the man behind Goth, and he is one of our contributors. And so, which leads directly to, I think, organically, one of the first things I want to discuss is the your contribution to the Bauhaus book. We already put it out, but
Oh.
I wanted to expand it. Also, there were some problematic contributors, and I just wanted to delete them and add some more people. We have interviews with David J. Haskins. We have interviews with Peter Murphy. We have an exclusive interview with Valar Khan from Christian Death.
Hmm.
This is he doesn't even do interviews, so this is just amazing. Um, and so there's a song by Bauhaus, a very, very famous song called The Passion of Lovers, right?
Hmm.
And it includes the line, well, it's like the little foxes are safe and sound. They were not dead, they'd gone to ground. The passion of lovers is for death, said she. And so, yeah. And
I'm glad that I don't have to sing, and so are
yeah,
your listeners. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. I even did my Peter Murphy impression on the John Majori on Bowie show. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shout out to Pickles. Shout out to Pickles, right? If you see Small Bear and Pickles present, right? That's my partner, Aaliyah Celeste Williams, a beautiful person. And we wrote a book with Sandy DeLuca, who's a, Bram Stoker Award nominee, a witch, and has collaborated with Silver Ravenwolf. So shout out to Sandy DeLuca, my heart, Pickles, my heart, Emily Frank, Anna Taborska, Lee Bales, okay, Michael H. Hansen. Okay, so this is a song. And because you're a folklorist and write about sort of these archetypes, I mean, among other things, and I mentioned that you were the curator of the Edgar Allan Poe Museum.
No, literary coordinator.
The literary coordinator, I'm sorry, the literary coordinator of the, that's really, really cool, of the Edgar Allan Poe Museum in Baltimore. And so that inspired me to bring you on board for this one. But so let's talk about that. And then
Okay.
so in order, I want to talk about the little foxes, and then I want to talk about Tater Bean, because Tater Bean is mythic, right? So let's talk about the little foxes.
Okay. So, when you assigned this, well, you assigned me to write.
Mhm,
And the one thing I want to say that you asked me to write essays, and very
mhm.
few people actually ask that of me. And it's something I do enjoy doing.
Oh, great.
It's funny. I hadn't flexed my essayist muscles, in a
Uh-huh.
minute. And
Yeah.
it was really delightful these past few books. Yes, to work on writing essays in a voice that was also like a creative nonfiction voice.
Mhm, yeah.
So, and I think that when you told me about the song and said that you were interested in Fox folklore, well, I could have easily written a lot more.
Mhm.
There's so much to say about foxes in folklore, and especially when it comes to the idea of a fox lover, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I went with the idea, and I might say this word wrong, forgive me, kitsune.
Uh-huh.
I went with the idea of the Japanese kitsune lore, and that is the shapeshifter fox
Nice.
that presents as a lover and then turns out to be a somewhat unstable relationship because they never stay. They never stay. They
Yeah.
can't stay. They can't belong to our world because they're part of another. And I thought that story kind of fit really beautifully with the song because it describes the idea that they've gone to ground. They simply are too much for each other. That it
Yeah.
cannot ever really happen, which is
Yeah.
heartbreaking as
Yeah.
well. It's like tragic love,
Exactly. Yeah. The best kind. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
unless
It's
you're living it. Then it's not so great.
unless right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and synchronistic stuff happens all the time. I actually wrote a book called um, Makami, which was actually, well, the core of a book. It was going to be a novel, but it was actually based on Japanese folklore and reality, because there's
Mhm.
these what do you call them? They're kind of crypto
I was gonna say
wolves.
yokai, or yeah,
Yeah, they're crypto wolves,
uh-huh,
called known as Makami, which is actually a mythical creature.
yeah.
And they're also real. And they went extinct in, I think, maybe the early 20th century. But then there were all these rumors, and there's actually um these Shinto shrines all over
Mm,
Japan that are devoted to these mythical characters called the Makami. They're really like little white wolves. And yeah, they're little white wolves, and so they're related to foxes, and that's interesting because they are boundary keepers as well.
Right.
And they're also you can't really I mean the it's a lesbian love story. The two characters are lesbian. I mean it's by, whatever, because that's what I write about. And they're one is Asian, European, and the other is an American who's actually turns out to be, have Japanese ancestry as well.
Right.
And so, bottom line is, she has this relationship with this crypto wolf shapeshifter. It's a kind of like a werewolf,
Right.
but they belong to Makami, which is mythical. So they're real and they're mythical too. There were all these rumors and sightings of these, crypto wolves, and it turns out that they're still around, but they're very, very seldom seen.
Mm.
And I find this kind of stuff really intoxicating.
Hmm.
And so yeah, to your point about anyway, so yeah, the crypto animals, the way. What I think also I see a lot of kind of commonality with neurodivergency and
Oh.
queerness as well,
Mhm.
because these are like a liminal, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, you're right, like liminal states and liminal beings. Like I think of Nicole as kind of a match is magic. I mean, she's pretty magic.
Hmm.
She kind of has this moon energy to me, right? Does that make sense? I mean,
It
you've known
does.
her for years, yeah. Just like very kind of just it's twofold. I mean, she's very complex, but this one is one of the kindest and most compassionate people I've ever known in my life. And she has this side of her which is like could be like a general and like create like these war plans that would be absolutely devastating. Yeah, it's like she's a general who chooses compassion. But
Hmm.
if she chose war, you know,
Yeah,
that's
she has a very rational side that sort of balances her creativity.
yeah, that's it's so neat. I never know, and I think a lot of my contributors and friends um, are like this. That so this which leads naturally to Caitlin or Kiernan. So I met Caitlin back through the Genie, is an early sort of a platform that was even before predated AOL, and it was actually kind of I only had it as a this is back during dial-up, modem
Hmm.
days when having a fixed 56 kps was like considered to be state of the art. It was like having a Maserati. It's like, you got a dial up, man, that's like 56 kps. I was like, yeah, yeah, it's rock and roll. So I met Caitlin over was the curator of completely unknown, the curator of the of a Poppy Z Bright fan forum, which was mostly devoted to people slamming Poppy. Just like, Poppy is dangerous. Poppy is immoral. Poppy says, controversial things. Poppy writes books like, Lost Souls that have, no moral center and I thought it was fascinating that a writer of fiction could elicit so much strong emotion. People seem to believe that now Billy Martin it was some sort of like horrible human being because their novels are complex and realistic as far as like psychologically realistic, not
Hmm.
portraying evil as this totality, but more like a coloration,
Mm-hmm.
I just immediately, Caitlin and I hit it off. It's one of the more improbable friendships because it's lasted more than 30 years. And so Caitlin's is a kind of a mythical creature, is a liminal creature. And as I will give you one endorsement, one blurb of Caitlin, which I think stands on its own and kind of, um, if you've never heard of her before, Caitlin R. Kiernan is an original Clive Barker, right? So, um, Caitlin over the years has this always blows my mind, has repeatedly referred to me in their blog, they still have a live journal blog, which is
Oh, wow. I didn't even know they still had Live Journal.
yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And puts me in the same frame as people like ST Joshi and Jeff Vandermeer. Now that's just exotic. Um, so I'd always been intrigued by her, her kind of trademark signature sign off later tater beans. And right. And one day, and I thought maybe it referred to the food item. And so one day I was like, Caitlin, what's up with the tater? Is it you're talking about like is that I know it's a dish that you grew up in the South in Alabama and lived in New Orleans. Is that sort of like you talking about like, the food? And she
Right, right,
said,
right.
well, yeah, but it's more has to do with Jeff Vandermeer. And I was like, oh, and then okay, so for the handful of people who've never heard of Jeff Vandermeer, if you've heard of something called The New Weird, you've heard of an actress named Natalie Portman, you've heard of a movie called Annihilation, is based on a novel by Jeff Vandermeer. And he's really important and significant to the what's called the New Weird movement. And he I mean, you can tell a story. So fill us in on who exactly and what exactly a tater bean is and what later tater beans actually signifies.
So, I was introduced to Tater Bean by writing this essay for you. This is a separate essay. This is different
Yeah.
than the Fox's essay.
Right.
And it was kind of an eco-mythic essay.
Hmm.
And by the way, that's right down my alley. I went vegan for a lot of reasons, but I was always an environmentalist too. So this definitely spoke to me.
Hmm.
And the idea of ecomythic as far as woodland creatures that think of the world as theirs,
Hmm.
that kind of like we're the thing that doesn't belong. I agree, by the way. I'm with them. And
Yeah.
I started out writing about wood nymphs, of course, and then I was introduced to Jeff Vandermeer's tater bean, who is a rescued possum living in a biodiverse area of Florida. And Tater Bean demonstrates how, even in the age of social media, when everything is so fast moving, that a woodland creature can still be an ambassador of the forest. So it's interesting. It's just as I'm talking about the environment, the sun came out on an otherwise gray, cloudy day here, and suddenly
Nice.
I'm like all lit up. But I was writing and reading and researching for this essay about all of these very ancient creatures and how they carry forward the idea of protecting their home, of protecting the diverse world that we live in, that we as humans seem to be gradually paving over. And Tater Bean is actually such a fantastic representation of an eco mythic character. Not so much a character as like a real creature, but a character nonetheless, because all creatures have personalities and
Hmm.
are individuals. I think a lot of people who don't spend time with animals kind of miss that.
Yeah.
They might be like, oh, my cat is special, but everything else is just whatever. It's not like that. All animals have their personality, and so does the prince of the backyard, Tater Bean.
Tater bean.
And right. So what fascinated me was the idea that Tater Bean could take over the role that wood nymphs used to play in
Nice.
mythology,
Nice.
right? So wood nymphs were once both adored and feared, and as time went on, their stories sort of faded. I mean, history would tell us a lot of reasons for that. Maybe things like, the Age of Enlightenment,
Hmm.
or people just got too busy for those kinds of stories. But
Yeah.
really, we all crave stories. I know you agree. We all crave stories because as humans, that's actually how we learn and how we sort of embody information and lessons is through story. So Tater Bean's story became his experience with the world and the way that a possum could interact with both humans and nature and what that role might look like.
Hmm.
So I think that having a place in the digital community kind of gave Tater Bean, through this more modern medium, the
Yeah.
same guardian role that wood nymphs maybe once played.
Yeah. I value that, enormously. And I also, I just want to, shout out to Caitlin R. Kiernan. Um, is a mythical creature, is a transgender woman, is a is a dark fiction author who doesn't really, you know, think of themselves as any kind of genre. I certainly don't. I would classify Caitlin more as like the James Joyce of our time, if
Mhm.
anything, and really one of the greatest writers who ever lived. And lives is also um, a a vertebrate paleontologist, is a biology professor, and works at the University of Alabama. And so has been responsible for naming and kind of discovering some, I think they're called Malosaurs, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, some actually some new, discoveries of dinosaurs. So it's really interesting. Also, Caitlin is very, we were talking about mythopoesis, and Caitlin has been very well known for kind of popularizing the concept of deep time, which is something that she talked about in the documentary Lovecraft's Fear of the Unknown, which also featured people like John Carpenter, Ramsey Campbell,
Mhm.
the director of Cronos, Guillermo del Toro, and uh, and some other people like we don't really talk about, like Neil Gaiman. Um, and
Yeah, yeah.
Ramsey is one of our S.T. Joshi as well. So Ramsey is one of our authors. S.T. Joshi is one of our authors. Caitlin is one of our authors. Actually, a kind of a core contributor. And yeah, we have a new we have, you know ST Joshi is going to be represented, and did an interview with him last year, and wrote something for the Poppy Z. Brite tribute as well. So it's really nice to have all those people in as represented in our books, and including my interview with John Carpenter. And this is just really beautiful because deep time is the idea that, you know all human history is really kind of like a blip. Everything is a blip. That there are periods of, where the the Earth's ages were like, we had this, the ice ages, and we had, there remember, there was a whole period where pretty much the only game in town were these like worms, right? That, like, you know what I mean? Like there was this just there was it was pretty much the planet of worms.
Right.
And then you had the whole millions of years where giant birds,
Hmm.
were in charge of shit. And then, I mean, literally, um, can you just imagine? And also, this also reminds me, okay, so I'm I'm just gonna I'm gonna, you know roll with being neurospicy AF. So I'm gonna course correct here. One of the things that I want to do, one of the books that I want to do, this is kind of inspired by a lot, but and I'm going to bring you on board for this as well. So the band Iron Maiden, uh, which I interviewed in
Yeah, yep.
1999, and Bruce Dickinson is a historian. He's a novelist. He's written screenplays. He's also an airline pilot, and he's a duelist, and God knows what else. He's also fascinated with the work of William Blake. And if you've, I mean, people who are actual fans of metal and Iron Maiden understand that it's not dumb. I mean, they had like 15-minute songs based on Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And that is okay. And Bruce always introduces that song. Song is about what not to do when a bird shits on you. The rhyme of the ancient mariner, if you dare. And the reason I've been thinking a lot about Bruce and Maiden is because I reached out after Phil Campbell, the guitarist, the long-term guitarist for the band Motorhead,
Mhm.
um, passed away at the age of 64. So condolences to the, Motorhead family and to, his many, many millions of fans worldwide. He was a good guy. I met him several times. And also he also performed with a band called the Iron Maidens, which is the world's only if all-female tribute band to Iron Maiden. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring you on board with the Iron, which I haven't even announced this, okay? I don't even know what to
Now you have.
call it. But yeah, right, so a literary tribute to Iron Maiden. Maybe I think I might call it Revelations. That's one of their songs. Now, the whole point of the song, I guess it's really a poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge called Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, right?
Mhm.
And it's about a bird,
Right.
an albatross.
Hmm.
The albatross begin with his vengeance. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, you know, um, and so it's all about how one of the sailors, and so interestingly enough, this the same image of the albatross. I don't know which came first. Probably, Baudelaire also wrote a very famous poem called L'Albatros, and it's the same theme. The sailors. I mean, I never thought about that. I never put that together. It's Coleridge,
Hmm.
right? So Coleridge and then Baudelaire. So those both wrote about an albatross. An
Hmm.
albatross is that what Baudelaire called the poet of the clouds.
Oh,
Isn't
yeah.
that beautiful?
It
And
is. It is.
and so I want you to write something about the albatross in Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And, so I'm one of the um, interviews I'm doing shortly. We just have to arrange around their schedule, but the Iron Maidens, you know, first and only all-female tribute band to Iron Maiden, considered by Maiden themselves to be their their female equivalent. So this is really exciting. So back to we're talking about myth
Eco
mythopoesis,
mythology. Yeah.
eco mythology, and
Yep.
Caitlin R. Kiernan. I always thought of Caitlin as sort of like this mythical beast that lives at the bottom of the ocean and occasionally emerges in deep time with there's a scattering of bubbles on the surface and then disappears. I mean, Caitlin wrote an introduction to my Clive Barker tribute,
Hmm.
which I also would love to have you on board as well. It's called
Actually, you do,
you.
remember?
I do. So yes, I'm so actually behind the publishing schedule. And so, yes, I have you on board that one
Hmm.
as well.
I
And
did the
so,
essay on magic.
yes, you did. And actually, Caitlin and Clive Barker collaborated. And the Gauntlet Press special edition of, is a limited edition of her first novel, Silk.
Mhm.
That's the one that, Clive Barker also said, Caitlin R. Kiernan is an original. Actually, the Gauntlet Press edition features a cover art by Clive Barker.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Hmm.
And actually, Barry Hoffman from Gauntlet Press originally commissioned me to interview Clive Barker, but it never happened. And so I'm really excited about that one as well. So Deep Time is something where you have geological ages
Hmm.
occur. We're and I really appreciate that Caitlin has never been somebody who also she's extremely neurodivergent and also talking about like liminal spaces, queerness, neurodivergency are actually structurally um, organically related. This is something I find absolutely fascinating. All the geniuses that I know who are both queer and neurodivergent or queer adjacent and neurodivergent, including, I mean, I wouldn't care. I don't know if I would, how I would, I don't want to characterize Nicole as anything other than a polymath genius. But she has a lot of neurospicy qualities, including, just being forthright. I mean, just
Yeah.
saying things, which is she's almost startling because just almost
I actually love that quality in her. I wish more
yeah,
people were that way.
exactly. No, I mean it's great, but it's like with most people are neurotic and you keep waiting for the shoe to drop. You know what I mean? It's like when they say sure, and then you think, what's the catch?
Yep.
But she says, yay, she means it. There's no irony. She says,
Yep.
yay, squeezes, and it's just like it's real. It's just,
Yeah.
and it's like, how many people are actually right there?
Yeah.
So shout out to, oh my gosh, squeezy hugs. Goodness. And trouble too.
Yes, absolutely trouble.
Trouble. So let's talk about trouble because trouble is a cat
Yes,
and
Trouble is a big floofy cat that's
uh,
beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
and actually, so this gets back to I mean, I can't believe we haven't talked about a collective paw.
I have it right here.
Yeah, yes. Now I'll take another selfie I mean, it's a third person selfie. So yeah, yeah. So yeah, that book. So let's talk about how you came on board Collective Paw.
Yeah. Well, I got a message from Nicole one day, and she said, I'd like to connect you to Alex. And there's a book being done that's an animal rights anthology, and I think you'd be a good fit for it. So I had met Nicole, I think a year, 2 years, maybe even more prior to that, when she was part of a different podcast during the pandemic, actually. And I had read some of my poetry on that podcast, so she knew I was a writer as well. And even after the first time, we had connected and like talked outside of the podcast. So she said, like, can I connect you? And I said, yeah, sure. I'd love to know more about it. And so then I met you on Facebook Messenger. And we corresponded a little bit, and I was like, well, I'll send you two poems. And what was interesting for me is that I very rarely get to write in my vegan voice. Now, when I was editor of the Vegan Journal, yes, of course. But as far as my creative writing, I mean, I sort of sneakily add my vegan perspective, but I don't always come right out with it. And so, it was a really cool experience getting to have that right up front. And, I belong to a critique group and we meet and look at each other's work, and I'm the only vegan. And so I remember I said, I'm going to submit some poems that I wrote more poems than you saw, that you saw the two best. And I sent them all these vegan perspective poems, and some things about them made them uncomfortable, and it it was interesting to me because the two poems that I ended up sending you were, hang on, I'm trying to find them, were about coffee and how coffee farms are problematic in so many ways. But one of the things they do is they kill sloth habitat. And so I wrote about a
Oh,
sloth. Yeah, I wrote about a sloth that was losing her home. And so that's what Empty Cups is about. And then I wrote Good Fences. So many, many years ago, I got to spend a summer in Vermont at Bennington College. And one of the
oh,
professors
nice.
took us to Robert Frost's grave and read a bunch of his poetry.
Wow.
And as you know, good fences make good neighbors.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I thought, how can I take that and spin it to factory farms?
Nice.
And that's what I did with the other poem that was called Good Fences, because you sure do need some real good fences between regular people and a factory farm to
Yeah.
um, keep everybody comfortably numb.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That reminds me actually, this is really, really interesting. So I don't know I don't know how much I've talked about on this show. We talked before the show, before I started recording about my time that I spent at EDA, secretarial services. And so one of the transcriptions that I did was of a woman who actually had was making a documentary. It was actually a documentary about her. And it was about Monsanto, and it was about
Mm,
GMOs. And one of the I'll never forget this because now I just saw I mean have you seen these ads for it's like, oh my God, it's so fucking misogynistic and awful and just like gaslighting. Okay. So it's like they have a really, really nice looking woman and I don't know, she's asking a buffed out guy. I don't know why having a dude sign off on a product is still considered that's still I mean what the fuck? I mean, are we in the 1950s, right? It was just like it was like are we in the McCarthy era? Is this like, Eisenhower, seriously, man.
right.
If you see this, it would make you sick, right? So she's like, it's almost like a Saturday Night Live parody or something, you know. She's like, oh my God, like I've got this, should I use this? And she's holding up a bag of Roundup or the other stuff. And a guy, maybe she's in a you know, what you might call it, where do you buy this like a fertilizer
Like
or
a like
like
a
a
um like a oh my God, my mind just went blank. Like a Home Depot or
like a
something.
Home Depot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So she's like in a Home Depot um type environment and she's looking for like what I mean it's like a neurotoxin. It's fucking
Basically.
awful
Yeah.
for you, but it's like a pesticide, right? So she's like, should I get this or this other stuff? Back in the 1950s and the 1960s, they used to have something called Brand X, right? It's like you got, the preferred product. And as I used to work in marketing, and advertising, and so, it was all about positioning, right?
Mhm.
How does your product compare with brand X? So it's like we have everything that the other guy has, but we got this extra stuff. And I always say that's why I position Nocturnicorn Books as, the home of literary and literal rock stars. And what I mean by literary stars Nicole six contributor to Weird Tales magazine as curated by Jonathan Maybury. He's also one of our authors. And, David J. Haskins, the songwriter of a little tune called Bela Lugosi's Dead, right? We talked about that. And I don't know, Jarba from Swans, just like, I don't know, maybe you've heard of them. Um, so, so, back to talking about this horrible ad. And she's like, oh my God, should I use this or the other one? A dude, he's a guy at this whatever Home Depot, esque establishment. It's like, uh, well, Roundup, and she's like, oh, okay, and it's like Roundup. It's like I mean, it's like an SNL parody. And I was like looking at this, going, "You gotta be shitting me, man! What is this?" Well, okay, like that's it. That's your
Yeah.
ad.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, um, like I have unfortunately I belong to this religious spiritual community called the Vedanta Society. It's been around for more than a century, and some of the members include like the Beatles and stuff. But it and one of our members uses Roundup, and has like Parkinson-esque symptoms. She shakes so badly because it's a neurotoxic poison. Anyway, the whole thing going back to Monsanto. So this woman, I transcribed this whole thing. I'll never forget it because she actually interviewed one of the she had this documentary film crew following her around and you know and she was working with these Japanese were they farmers, I think. And so they were very, very concerned about GMOs
Mhm.
and contamination. And so they actually talked to, and this is in the documentary, they talked to the one of the main administrators or executives at Monsanto. And they're saying, and then what about buffer zone? What about buffer zone? Because they were concerned that these GMOs would get into their crops. And the guy from Monsanto was like, yeah, don't worry about it. It's already in your crops.
Right.
It's already
Right.
like the sheer kind of like Kafka meets Kurt Vonnegut meets William S. Burroughs. The
Yep.
reality we live in is so extraordinarily dark and grim. That is why I I really I'm trying to create an alternative universe in which people like you, me, Nicole, Caitlin, um, Ellen, maybe have, our voice will be as significant, as important, and overwrite the brutality, cruelty, and can we talk about, I mean, some of the really dark stuff, because we're facing unprecedented levels of, just not just of cruelty and inhumanity in this country and around the world now, where
I agree.
billions of people are suffering, billions, and we never really think about animals and how they're hurting from things like global climate change, what's happening to the rainforests, what's happening to the destruction of the polar ice caps, what's happening to erosion,
Hmm.
with soil, where a little thing called nitrogen fixation,
Right.
and it's almost like we're back in the 1930s or something, where which is just like in like 1939. I mean, I really feel, and I have a lot of Jewish friends. I have a lot of Jewish friends, dear friends of mine, like Ellen Mabey, Jan Steckel. Is a shout out to Jan Steckel, Lambda Literary Award-winning, author, poet, disability rights and by rights activist, and alumnus of Yale University Medical School and Harvard Radcliffe, for English literature. And, you know, I mean, it's one of my best friends, sort of kind of an alternative voice, but in order to have an alternative voice, you have to confront, I think, talking about, can we talk about what do you see as the biggest existential threats to humanity and species?
Wow. Us.
Yes, us. Yeah, we
We
have,
are the biggest threat. We humans are the biggest threat to ourselves and to the planet and to every other species that exists here.
yeah,
And I don't think this is as simple as that. I gave you a very simple answer, but I think it's actually a very complex topic. And how do I even sum it up? Um, I don't think that most people are intentionally doing evil things. I don't think so. Nobody sets out in their day saying, I want to do evil that will destroy myself and the planet. Well, maybe, but
that
very
we
few
know
people.
of, that we
But
know
yeah,
of. Yeah.
nobody that I know sets out their day that way. Let me say it like that.
I mean, you have people like Elon Musk who literally did a Heil Hitler salute. And so, you know,
Yeah, he probably wakes up and wants to do evil. I don't know him. I can't say. I've never met him personally. So I have no point of reference. So that was completely my own opinion. But
yes, yes,
yeah, so maybe who, like I said, don't know the guy,
don't know the
but
guy.
I'm surely not a big enough deal to even register in his world. But that said, I think that as a historian, I would tell you that people generally don't learn from the past. And that's always very disappointing to me because I think the past is incredibly informative. And that if we could learn more from the past, if we could learn more from our very basic bones of education. So I
Mhm.
recently was in a museum called the Mutter, and there's a whole wall of human skulls.
Yes.
Yes, in Philadelphia. And at that moment, you feel everyone's sameness. You can look at the skulls and you can look at the people around you and say, we all have a skull that could be sitting on this shelf. And in that moment, you are completely equal to everyone. And in that way, I feel like we're all completely equal in our responsibility to keep our homes safe. And I don't necessarily mean like these four walls. Obviously, we all want to feel safe in our house or our
Yeah,
apartment or our cottage or whatever you dwell in.
right,
But I mean the world we live on, because without this planet, there's nowhere to have your dwelling. There's nowhere to get food. There
right.
is nowhere to get water, and there's nowhere for your family to ever be safe.
Yeah.
And when I say family, I include your furry friends too,
Yes. And your scaled friends
and
and your, you
feathery
know, and
ones
feathery,
too.
yes. And, you know,
Yep, all of
yeah,
that. And
yeah,
I feel like a lot of people miss that because all of these problems are put in front of us that distract us from the bigger picture. And
yeah,
I don't know how it happens. I don't know that I can even explain exactly how the system works because we're put onto this constant treadmill where we're barely able to keep up and function, where we're barely able to do enough to make ends meet, where people have to work two or three jobs just to exist, and they don't have any time or extra bandwidth to care for themselves or the planet. They just have to keep running to keep their head above water. And the unfortunate reality is that this very system will eventually make us run out of water.
yeah,
Yeah, and I don't have a great enough mind, Alex, to tell you what the answer to this is.
yeah.
I don't think it's going to come from the top. I think it's going to come from down below. I don't think that anybody at the top is completely worried about that as much as they should be, which is
Yeah.
absolutely confounding to me
Well,
because it's kind of like
they think they're going to take a SpaceX rocket ship and just, you know, whatever to some
I
other,
guess. I guess they're gonna go, I don't know, to one of the, moons of Jupiter, like in the movies.
right,
But,
yeah, right.
back here in reality where I live, um, we're nowhere near close to doing that.
Yeah.
So, I think it was 3 years ago for my birthday, my mom took me to see William Shatner speak.
Oh, nice.
And we didn't have the tickets where you get to meet him, but it was still really cool to hear him talk.
Wow.
And he was incredibly inspiring. And he talked about how empty and cold it was when he went into space. He talked about how it was nothing like the adventure that he thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
That he looked back and that he could see that the Earth was in pain and he could see the things on the Earth that were dying from space. Like he could tell that there were parts of the planet that things just didn't look right anymore.
Oh,
And
that hurts my heart.
If you even
Yeah.
go and find the video and watch him after he came
Wow.
out of the space, the rocket,
Hmm.
he doesn't have, he's not drinking champagne, he's not partying. Whereas like everybody else was like, woohoo, party on. He was not in that place.
Oh my
He
God.
was pensive. He looked like he had literally seen his ghost. He, I think what he fairly articulately said was that he'd seen the ghost of the planet and he didn't understand why we weren't all worried and he didn't understand why everybody wasn't making it more of a priority
Yeah.
to figure out how to continue to live on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was not just a moving talk in so many other ways, but that really hung with me. And, I feel like I go above and beyond to do everything I can. I drive out of my way to recycle things in my Prius. I have been vegan for 31 years, which means my impact on the earth is way less. I wear all used clothing.
Yay.
I, I do every little thing I can think of. Thank you. I do every little thing I can think of
My heart.
to, to try to do my share. And then like I look at my brother's kids and my friends' kids, and I love them so much. And I think, what am I leaving for you? I'm trying so hard not to mess it up for you, but I worry that there aren't enough people that are worried.
Yeah. What do you think is this is another question that like we could, this is sort of like, the question of like, themes like theodicy, the origin of evil or epistemology, how we know what we know, but it's nevertheless I I do believe that we are in an unprecedented era in human history where the very nature of ethical um what I mean Kant and others Kierkegaard, Heidegger, but Kierkegaard especially talked about how the ethical
Right.
is the essence. I mean, it is like is kind of how do I think it's um ontologically attached to the ground of being, what Heidegger called the ground of being,
Hmm.
and insofar as there is any center, of the ecosystem, and it is ethics are as real as gravity.
Mm,
So we have reached a point unprecedented in human history where the fundamental agreement, the social contract has been ruptured.
yeah,
And it's like we used to worry about the hole in the ozone layer, where there's a hole in the ethical
there is. Yeah.
layer.
Yeah.
How did this happen? It didn't happen overnight.
It did not, but see, I feel like it's been a gradual process.
Yeah,
And I would say it's even probably during my lifetime. I'm
yeah,
51 years old, and I remember a time in my life. I'm still a pretty upbeat person.
yeah,
I'm one of those. I always say I am always optimistic that things could turn around and everything could go right.
right.
But do I believe that's going to happen today? No, I don't.
Yeah, yeah, I
But it
know.
could. It could.
It could.
So I I think within the years that I've been observing, I would say since I was a teenager, I have gone from feeling like the world was progressing and everything was moving forward and there was so much to be excited about to suddenly it doesn't feel that way. It feels like things have regressed. And
Hmm.
my opinion, for what it's worth, I feel like there's this atmosphere of greed that I don't remember before. And it's possible that it existed and I just was too young or naive to feel
Yeah,
it. But I don't remember it being as overwhelming as it is now.
yeah,
So, I mean, one example of that, this is a little bit of a dark experience I had. I was in a regular store and a man walked up to me, said something horrible, followed me around. I was about to turn him into the security and he disappeared. And he was waiting for me when I walked out the door of that store. That kind of thing didn't happen to me in my 20s and 30s. It just didn't
Oh,
happen.
wow.
People weren't empowered to be awful as much. There were still awful people, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't happen as much. And that's not the only time in the past few years that I've had an experience where I was unsafe in a public place where I should have been just fine. It was just the scariest one because he was waiting in the parking lot. Not at my car, but in the way to get to the parking lot. I just turned right around and went right back in and got security. So but it scared me and I was rattled for days and constantly looking over my shoulder, the kind of thing that happens to people more and more as we've all sort of come into a place where we've dehumanized each other. And I don't know who or how or why or when it became okay to dehumanize each other. I mean, that's the stuff of horror. That's what we horror writers
Yeah.
write about.
That's what I
And
read about. Yeah.
suddenly it's happening in everyday life. It's government sanctioned. It's in front of us all the time. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I don't know how we arrived here, Alex. It's shocking.
Yeah, it is.
And especially, I occasionally have edited novels for people. And I remember at one point, somebody who used to write political intrigue, suspense novels called me and said, I don't know how to write these anymore because the
Yeah.
things happening in the real world are worse than anything I ever came up with previously.
Yeah.
And I said, well, maybe you should switch genres. Go with romance. You
Go with
know?
romance. Yeah.
Yeah, start writing romance. People want to escape this now.
There are, well, that's then leads to a natural transition. I know you have to go, but pretty soon. But I wanted to talk about The Crow because that's our last collaboration, our most recent
Yes,
collaboration, and so the book itself
it's
was in,
this one.
yes, inspired
Yep.
by none other than John Shirley,
Yep.
and who co-wrote. So I mean, I don't have to explain what The Crow is.
Of course not.
Right? But everybody, well,
Everybody knows the crow.
sometimes I'm a little surprised that people, don't
Hmm,
seem to know
yeah.
things. But yeah, so John Shirley has been one of my biggest supporters over the years, and in 1994, he wrote. Well, actually, it wasn't a collaboration. It was interesting because he and David J. Scow, who's also the guy who created the splatterpunk genre and wrote a movie called the Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Yep.
3, which is also something that is actually very, very fascinating. And I can see doing a literary tribute to Toby Hooper, the creator of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because that is really, really, and talk about veganism, or talk about satire on,
Yep.
like, oh my God, a satire on, we're literally the meat,
Hmm.
and is I think it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies are absolute genius, genius stuff. So yeah, so David J. Scow and John Shirley did separate passes on and a movie which was I think it was Edward Pressman who also produced Blade Runner, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong. Um, and we don't even have time to talk about Paul M. Salmon. But anyway, so uh, let's just say John Shirley was, friend of, William S. Burroughs,
Hmm.
and was part of an ecosystem that included Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails, my good friend Ken Goffman, Are You Serious? Mondo 2000, William Gibson, Bruce Sterling, basically the people behind, cyberpunk. And so he there's a whole story about there was going to be a soundtrack
Hmm.
to Neuromancer, the novel that so William Gibson wrote, which actually um, included songs by Devo and Nine Inch Nails and it was going to have like and parts of this wound up in this album called Cyberpunk by Billy Idol, who was a friend of Pleasant Gehman, Joan Jett, and it's a whole long story. But there's the whole punk rock thing, which we don't have time to discuss on this program. So yeah, so surely um, I think there were several passes. I believe John Palisano did a pass on The Crow. It was based on the iconic comic book by James O'Barr, who
Hmm.
was a huge fan of bands like, Joy Division and Bauhaus. And actually, I don't know how many people know this, but the cover, the face of The Crow, Eric
Hmm.
Draven, is actually it's Peter Murphy.
I know it because I wrote the essay for you.
You wrote the essay,
I
exactly.
did.
And so this ties in together, everything is connected. Quantum entanglement. So we got, I feel like, George Bush Sr., like quantum entanglement, or Christopher Walken, right? Yeah. Um, so yeah, so John Shirley did a pass, David J. Scow did a pass. It famously starred Brandon Lee, and it was a very tragic.
Mhm.
His you might get into down a rabbit hole of seeing there was something really, really sketchy. It wasn't just the curse, the curse of the Bruce Lee family. There might be something more sinister that happened. Interestingly enough, the guy who was responsible, the actor who was responsible for discharging, unbeknownst to him, the weapon that killed Brandon Lee, was the same guy who's in the movie, um, uh, uh, not 8 millimeter, but Seven.
Oh,
He's the guy who talks about, when what's his name? Brad
Brad
um,
Pitt, Morgan
Brad
Freeman.
yeah, Brad Pitt says, "Do you like these things you do?" And he says, "No, I don't." That's the guy who works at that goth club,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I know
So
who you mean.
that's the guy. Yeah. And he's the actor who was, you know, unfortunately responsible for, I mean, he was the agent, the physical agent through which Brandon Lee was killed. And the soundtrack includes Henry Rollins, Rage Against the Machine, Nine Inch Nails, and like My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult, and which also the bassist is a friend of mine. Yeah, I know it's improbable, but this is so yeah. So we talk a little bit about the Crow, and I think you have to go, and then maybe we could get some poetry reading in.
Yeah, maybe
Okay,
so.
great. Okay,
You know, I was a 90s kid, so I loved The Crow, right?
yeah,
I saw it in the movie theater. I absolutely loved it. I've probably watched it dozens of times in my
yeah,
life.
yeah,
It feels like an old friend at this point, to be honest
yeah,
with you.
yeah.
I'm that familiar with the movie, but the book is about revenge. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap is a literary tribute to revenge, which is, well,
Yes.
what a rich topic,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah,
And I thought when you said, could you bring the crow into this? I was like, of course. It's the movie
it
about
is the
revenge,
movie.
right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is the I mean, there are other movies where revenge is definitely a main part of the plot, but that's the whole theme of the crow. But then you have the actual crow itself, this magical bird that has had meaning from every culture, pretty much.
yeah,
The bird that flies between the living and the dead and brings back Eric Draven, to enact revenge upon the
right.
people who were villains in every way. Let's be real.
Yeah, right.
They didn't just kill him and his girlfriend and burn people's buildings and businesses. They were into every villainous thing you can pretty much think of.
I want to bring out a few books. I'll be 3 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, this is show and tell. Actually, I have a
Okay.
signed. So the first one I want to show folks is the signed copy, personally signed copy of Wet Bones by John Shirley.
Mm.
So this is the Mark Ziesin books, limited edition, hardcover. Okay, the man himself, John Shirley. And this is the the Crow. This by James O'Barr.
Oh
The
yeah.
the and like I said, face is it's Peter Murphy. And it's he was inspired by Joy Division, by The Cure, by um, very famously Nine Inch Nails. Trent Reznor did a cover of Dead Souls by Joy Division. That was part of the soundtrack of the Crow film. This is City Come a Walkin'. I always think of Christopher Walken, John Shirley, and a forward by William Gibson, who was actually became more famous. This is why it has a forward by the guy who was his protege, became
Hmm.
more famous than John Shirley himself. So that is, yeah. Uh, and it's just John Shirley was Cyberpunk's Patient Zero, first locus of the virus, certifiably virulent William Gibson, the Hugo award-winning Hugo and Nebula and everything else award-winning author of Neuromancer, Count Zero, Mona Lisa Overdrive, also a song by I was on the soundtrack to The Matrix by Juno Reactor. Okay, now I have Exquisite Corpse by Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z. Bright, who wrote the foreword to our Bauhaus tribute and the introduction to our William S. Burroughs tribute, which has a foreword by Graham Masterton, the author of The Manitou. And so, yeah, we have some incredible authors with us. And then this is The Crow, the Lazarus Heart, which is by Poppy Z. Bright, Billy Martin from Harper Prism. And this the special edition, this is, pre-transition Poppy Z. Bright, who I actually met and interviewed in person, which is crazy. But um the so the special edition, I think it was also Gauntlet Press of The Crow, the Lazarus Heart. The afterword was written by none other than, if you guessed John Shirley, you would be correct. And I was able to, I put out the word. Usually Billy Martin was gonna, put it out on his social media, but he didn't have time or whatever. And shout out to Billy Martin, by the way. So we're doing the Billy Martin tribute anthology, Exquisite Corpus. Now, what's the whole point? Well, the point is that I have a lot of books to reshelf, and we're going to go back to you talking about the Crow. Let's talk about like the psychopomp aspect
Of the crow itself.
of the
Yeah,
Crow. Yeah,
it is the creature that goes, like I said, back and forth between life and death.
yeah,
And it sort of works opposite in the crow because in many tellings, the crow is the one who crosses you into death, right?
right.
You know, your soul, you die, and it escorts your soul across into the underworld. But in this movie, it does the opposite. It brings back a soul with unfinished business
Hmm.
to, wrap things up for justice.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody wants to hear this story because they want to see the bad guys get what's coming to them. I
Yeah.
mean, the bad guys are just so very bad in The Crow.
Yeah. Right.
You know, like I said, they're into everything bad. They're not just
Yeah.
into one thing bad. They're into
Right. Yeah.
everything bad.
Everything bad.
Yeah. They're just like dream crushers.
Right. Yeah.
And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, there's the next name of a of an anthology for you, The Dream Crushers. And but stories about villains. But
A literary tribute to villainy?
yeah, that's perfect.
Why not? Okay.
But yeah, when I really thought about The Crow as a tribute to revenge, I thought about how Eric Draven didn't even choose to come back and do the things he was doing. He was brought back by the psychopomp, by the Crow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was like basically directed, like, this is your purpose now. In his life, he was a musician, and he was playing all the normal roles of life. He had dreams,
Right.
he
Yeah.
had hopes, he was hoping to get married, he had friends, he
And
had
it's
all of
like,
these things
what was it?
crushed.
The
Yeah,
line in the film, who gets married on Halloween? Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Well, and it was born on Halloween. This guy. Yeah,
oh, no
right?
kidding,
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting that when we think about the character of Eric Draven and how you know, he comes back and he knows everything that's been lost, and he goes back to his home and he sees the ruins of a life. And of course, the crow is his constant companion and his vision.
Yeah.
The crow is showing him which way to go, showing him how to defeat the bad guys one at a
Yeah.
time,
Right.
literally.
And
Well, until we get about halfway through the movie.
there's also like it's like sort of thermal vision is like crow
Hmm.
vision, right?
It is. It's and
Yeah.
it's beautifully executed.
Yeah.
You kind of end up hoping like, wow, I hope crows really do that.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
But yeah. So, it's interesting. I used to feed a murder of crows. They haven't been around for a while,
Yeah.
but I used to feed, they liked cat food and peanuts and cranberries.
Nice. Nice. I love
Yeah,
that.
but they
Yeah.
would come and sit right outside of my window here where I sit and work and hop around and do crow stuff. And it was fantastic. I loved seeing them every day.
Yeah,
So,
that's so beautiful. I wonder if I may, it's like, hey, do you have a copy of Collective Paw?
it's right in front of me.
Okay. Yeah, so I if you could, I mean, I would like you to read your poems, but also I would love it if you would read Ellen Mabie's poem
Oh,
Whiff of Wonder, because the origin of a Collective Paw.
all right. Hang on. Let me find it. So in all honesty, I haven't practiced reading that one, but I'll do my
That's
best.
fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, I've got it. It's on page 14. And hopefully I do it justice. Okay. I'll begin.
Okay, great.
Whiff of wonder. There's such a pain in the world, like we all stepped on a thumbtack at the same time, and we can either take a step forward or a step back, but there is something in the collective pull of the world holding us up. For some, it's music. For some, it's a rainbow. For some, it's nature. For some, it's love. The world must contain wonder when it feels all the breath and wishes contained. Even a whiff of wonder at the right moment in time can do wonders living in the world.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? And
It's absolutely
look,
beautiful.
it's beautiful. And my friend, speaking of Ellen, you know, she just recently posted that the Long Islander, which is the newspaper that was
Hmm.
founded by Walt Whitman, is called Walt's Corner. And it's been,
Hmm.
I mean, it's literally been, published since Walt's time.
Mhm.
And Walt was a correspondent of Bram Stoker. That's
Mhm.
another thing that many people don't know. In fact, I include or actually, is Stoker. Bram Stoker was in love with Walt Whitman. So that's one of the things I'm publishing in the Bauhaus book is Stoker's love letter to Walt Whitman. So anyway, um, the uh, the um, the Long Islander recently published Whiff of Wonder,
Oh, that's
right?
wonderful.
Bringing
It is
everything
a
full
delightful
circle.
poem. Yeah.
Yeah. And so my partner, Leah Celeste Williams, shout out to Pickles, i- in rural Monroe, Michigan, has she and I used to do more like we would hang out on Facebook chat and used to be able to play like videos and stuff.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, we'd watch music and so let's see if there's any Ellen Maybe's videos. So we found one and where she's reading her iconic poetry in a very, very distinctive style. She's always got the hat and the glasses and and just her what she calls the Jewish grandmother hair, right? Just and so she was reading this poem and the whiff of wonder, and when it came to the line, there's something in the collective paw. Pickles and I just looked at each other. He's like, and we both had struck by the very same thing. So this is the mythical origin story of a collective paw, an anthology, which became an imprint, which became kind of an international movement in a way,
Hmm.
and which led directly to the anthology of the same name. So I kept thinking, it's sort of like the beings are kind of trying to communicate something to us, right? Via this liminal person named Ellen Maybe, as she calls herself, the Enigma, right? She's the Enigma. I'm very eccentric. I'm an enigma, the myth, the myth. She's like a funny Emily Dickinson. She's a riot. Also very dark. A lot of stuff that I don't think people get about her complex genius. And I thought, wow, there's something and I was thinking, there is something in the collective paw. There is something in the collective paw. What are the animals trying to tell us? It's like, hello, hello,
Yeah.
what about us? And I felt the same way about Greta Thunberg, when she was, and it's so horrifying, the violence that's been done to
Hmm.
her,
It
but
is, but her mission is incredible.
her mission is incredible. And when she first came onto the scene and appeared, she, talk about some, like wood nymphs. I thought, well, she's like the voice of the forest. I very much like, like a tater bean kind of, a liminal bean. Talking about neurodivergency, right? Again, and I felt like that through Ellen's majestic poem that animal was trying to communicate with us. And I thought, what if we did something, but it was kind of a germ. It was an idea. And I started playing around with, I created an imprint and I called it a collective paw. And I had our wonderful designer and illustrator, graphic artist, award-winning novelist, and script writer for the BBC, Adrian Baldwin. Shout out to Adrian Baldwin. Uh, created a logo called a collective paw with a paw on it.
Hmm.
And I, one day shortly thereafter, I started using it as my profile picture, and it's kind of an anchor for
Hmm.
everything. And I had a lot of problems with social media, people attacking me, blah blah blah, cancel culture campaigns, yada yada, murder threats. I don't know. It's a whole deal. And but as soon as it was almost like I was like a good luck charm or something. It was like a sigil. When I put the collective paw thing, things started to happen for us. It was very magical. And, shortly after I started putting it up, I got a message from Nicole, and she was like, "I would like to contribute to a collective paw." And I said, "Well, that's beautiful, but what do you have in mind?" Because I said, "Well, it's a name of an imprint." And she said, "Oh, well, this would be a good." And then I said, "Would you like it to be something else?" I said, "Would you like it to be a book?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, so let's talk this through. What would it be? Um, Obviously, it would be something to do with animals." And she said,
Hmm.
"Yeah." And I said, "Okay, so I think that it should be a benefit." And then she said, "How about cats?" I said, "Well, how about animals, you know?" And so, she and I and Emily Frank, Ron Whitehead, and Ellen Mabey. So Emily Frank and Ellen Mabey and Iris Berry, they're all really, really good friends. Uh, so we got together, and pretty soon it was an award ceremony. So we did this thing. I mean, Ron Whitehead, shout out to Ron Whitehead, whose fans include the late great Hunter S. Thompson. You know, no big deal, right? Um, and he's collaborated with people like, I don't know, Jimmy Carter and the Dalai Lama. He's also kind of a like uncanny, person, but a two-time nominee for the Nobel Prize in Literature. And so we did something called the Pawsies, the Collective Paw Awards, right? Last year we had Nicole, we had Ron Whitehead, with Emily Frank, and Pickles, and Ron, and it was a very beautiful thing. But oh yeah, so could you read some of your poetry?
Okay. And then I have to get going.
Of course. I mean, thank you for giving us a little extra time.
Of course. Did you want me to read from this?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Okay. I'll read Good Fences.
Okay, excellent.
The fence was not questioned. It stood between two worlds, plate and pasture, because good fences make good neighbors. One side, strong, clean planks, fresh white paint brushed onto wood, a rustic picture of farm life. The other, packed shoulder to shoulder, crammed into pens and unable to turn, best not to ask about the sounds at dawn. We were taught protein, not beings, taught not to look at faces behind metal bars, electric wire, but there is something that does not love a wall. One day a board bent, and the wind carried panic and ammonia, then a missing slat, a broken post, and truth slipped through like streaks of sunlight, illuminating one person at a time. Each saw their eyes were not blank, but watching, searching for compassion. Good fences make good neighbors, someone said, reaching for a hammer, intending to rebuild. But what are you walling in or closing out? Does the fence hold your discomfort? An illusion that perhaps what happens on the other side is not real. Perhaps once the fence falls, truth is uncomfortable. I say we were never good neighbors to those on the other side, but we are learning. We are learning that kindness makes good neighbors.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's beautiful. It's touching. It's marvelous. It's marvelous. Yeah. I mean, of course I published it. So yeah, I agree with myself. Yeah, that's
So, Well, thank
Yeah.
you for having me today, and thank you for publishing me in all of these different books.
Oh, you're so welcome. And
Yeah.
we had such a good time. We didn't even have time to. I would love to have you back. At your convenience. To talk about Bowie and to talk about some of the other books that we have coming up. I mean,
That would be great. And I'd love to come back on after my chapbook is out too, so
yes.
that I can tell you more about that. Those are all poems to read at bedtime.
Yeah, so great. So how can people, for all our five viewers, how can people, follow you on social
I
media
I
and
am on Instagram as Sassy Pants Rider. I
Sassy
am
Pants
on
Writer?
I'm on Facebook as Rissa Miller, and my website is teandsmoke.com.
Cool. So could you also like I know you have like some you're in some books. You've written several books, and you have
Hmm.
uh, besides the, of course, I always like to, you know, platform our books, but what are some other anthologies and magazines, etc., that you're in?
Well, the most recent work I did is actually a children's book.
Oh,
It's called Room
cool.
with a Boo. I have it here. It's the only other thing I grabbed today before you. This came out
Well,
last fall, and it is about a little girl who meets a ghost in a hotel and they become friends.
that's
It is a
so
book about
cool.
inclusivity.
That's
Yeah.
so I love that because I have a actually a departed friend, and I consider them to be, somebody that I we hang out,
Yeah.
and it's not really that odd. I think more and more people are going to recognize, and you know after we've kind of broken that ground and breached that taboo of saying you cannot hang out with you know people who have passed on.
Right. Right.
Just like just, oh, it's just a pet is just the most ironic, you know, thing you could possibly say. I mean, I had a dog who used to pet me, and it's just so beautiful. So, okay,
Yeah.
you've got a room with a
A
boo.
boo. A room with a boo. Yep.
That's so beautiful. So yeah, I'd love to have you back on, and always end up with a squeezins, just a nice warm squeezy hug. So
Thank you. And right back at you. Thanks again
okay.
for having me.
Thank you so much, Rissa.
Mhm.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye bye.